Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something fascinating. What actually happens, like physically and mentally, when you stop eating sugar for 30 days? Our sources promise some, well, pretty huge benefits, almost unimaginable, some say,
Yeah.
but also some surprising hurdles, especially right at the start.
That's right. And while weight loss is often the first thing people think about, it's really just a small part of it, a tiny piece.
Okay.
This deep dive, we're going to uncover some surprising stuff about sugar. Its real nature, how it affects your whole body. You'll get a good handle on it quickly but thoroughly.
All right, let's jump in then. The very first thing, the thing people often hit like a wall when cutting sugar is some kind of withdrawal. Our sources say it's the #1 reason people don't stick with it. Why? What's going on there?
Well, what's really striking is how addictive refined sugar truly is. It's not just in your head.
Okay.
Our sources reveal it hits those pleasure receptors, the reward centers in your brain, very much like potent drugs, heroin, cocaine, that level of activation. Now, there's a difference, right, between natural sugars, say, in fruit or a little bit of honey. Those are less likely to cause that strong addiction.
Right.
But the refined, concentrated stuff in processed foods, it just bypasses your body's normal checks and balances, and boom, you're kind of hooked.
So that addiction part is huge. But is there more to it? Like beyond the brain craving? Is there a physical side to the withdrawal? Like your body's missing its usual fuel?
Exactly. That's the second piece. Your body's been trained, essentially, to run on sugar and those quick-burning processed carbs. So you take that away, and yeah, there's this temporary feeling of, like, running on empty. But here's the interesting part.
Yeah.
Your body is smart. It doesn't stay empty for long. Very quickly, it starts burning fat instead. It becomes fat-adapted.
Fat-adapted, okay.
And fat, our sources point out, is actually the preferred fuel for most of your organs. It's a much more stable, long-lasting energy source.
So it's like switching fuel tanks.
Pretty much. And this switch, this adaptation, it can start happening really fast. Minutes to hours. Getting fully flexible, metabolically speaking, takes maybe a few weeks.
Oh, so that's why the 30 days.
Exactly. It's not just about the physical shift. It takes that long to really change the habits, too. A week just isn't enough to make it stick and avoid undoing all the good work.
That makes sense. Now, a big question people have, and honestly, I sometimes wonder too, what do we mean by sugar when we say cut it out?
Yeah, good question.
Does it mean fruit? What about bread, rice, those complex carbs, and, the little bits in deli meat or milk and coffee?
Okay, let's break that down.
Yeah.
Typically, when sources talk about cutting sugar, they mean sucrose,
Right.
Table sugar.
White sugar.
Yeah. And sucrose is made of two parts. One glucose molecule, one fructose molecule, the glucose part. That's what directly raises your blood sugar, triggers insulin. But the fructose part, this is key. It's really different. It doesn't spike blood sugar much, but it uniquely kind of clogs up the liver. Our sources compare it to alcohol and how it affects the liver.
Really? Like alcohol?
Yeah. And in fact, they state fructose is the #1 cause of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're even seeing it in kids now, which is scary, mostly due to all the sugar they consume.
Wow, okay. That liver connection is huge. So this brings up those healthy alternatives. People avoid white sugar, but they'll use honey or agave, maybe maple syrup. They think it's way better.
The natural halo.
Exactly. Is it actually better, metabolically speaking?
This is where it gets really interesting and often misunderstood. The sources reveal that chemically, in terms of sugar composition, many are basically the same as table sugar.
Seriously?
Yeah, take honey. It's about 50% glucose, 50% fructose.
So identical to white sugar?
Pretty much identical sugar makeup. Yes, it's natural, has some other minor properties, maybe antibacterial. But if you're cutting sugar, it's still sugar.
Okay. What about agave? That's often pushed as super healthy.
Agave is the real shocker, actually. It's maybe 20% glucose, but like 80% fructose. 80.
80%. Whoa.
So while it causes less of an immediate blood sugar spike, that huge fructose load makes it potentially worse for your liver than even high fructose corn syrup.
Worse than high fructose corn syrup. I did not expect that.
Yeah. And speaking of HFCS, like in soda, it's usually around 45% glucose, 55% fructose. And its molecules aren't bound together like sucrose, so they get absorbed instantly. Much higher glycemic impact.
Okay.
And things like maple syrup, brown sugar, molasses, cane juice, fruit juice, regular cane sugar, they all land roughly in that 50-50 glucose-fructose camp. Similar to white sugar, maybe tiny traces of minerals, but not enough to make a difference if sugar itself is the issue.
Okay, so basically sugar is sugar, regardless of the fancy name or natural label, especially that fructose component for the liver.
You got it. Especially the fructose.
So then what about things like bread, rice, pasta? Are they sugar too? They get called complex carbs, often framed as healthy.
Right, the complex carb question. It's important. How do they
Yeah.
stack up?
Yeah.
So starches, which you find in bread, white or whole grain, doesn't matter as much here. Rice, corn, pasta, potatoes. They are essentially just long chains of glucose molecules.
It's just glucose.
Just glucose, yeah.
Okay.
And even though they're complex, enzymes right in your mouth start breaking them down almost immediately.
Wow.
Which means, and this surprises people, they can spike your blood sugar even faster than table sugar sometimes.
Faster. Wow.
But here's the crucial difference. They are 100% glucose, no fructose.
Ah, okay. So metabolically.
Metabolically, that makes them better than the fructose-containing sugars, especially for your liver, even though they still hammer your blood sugar pretty hard.
And whole grains. Does the fiber help much?
It helps a bit, yeah. You get some fiber, maybe a few extra nutrients, but the glucose impact, still very significant, quite similar to refined grains, actually.
Got it. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Weight loss is a motivator for many, sure. It's important. But our sources keep saying that's just scratching the surface. What are the other, maybe deeper benefits people experience when they cut sugar?
Oh, the benefits are vast, really vast, emotionally, mentally. People consistently report things like much better focus,
Focus.
stable energy, no more of those 10 or 11 a.m. crashes after breakfast.
Yeah, those.
Right, a better mood overall, like a higher baseline, and also just this huge sense of empowerment. Like you've overcome an addiction, you're not being controlled by some external thing. That feels really good.
That makes sense, that feeling of control. And physically, what else changes beyond weight?
Physically, it's pretty amazing too. Our sources highlight less pain.
Less pain. How?
Reduced inflammation. Sugar, especially in excess, is highly inflammatory. So joint pain, shoulder, wrist, fingers, knees, that can genuinely improve.
Interesting.
Better teeth, too. Fewer cavities, obviously, but also less plaque, less tartar buildup. Performance, even in sports, can get better. More endurance. Because your body learns to use fat, remember, that steady, long-lasting fuel.
Right, the fat adaptation.
Exactly. And then internally, big improvements. Better digestion, a healthier gut microbiome, improved immune function. People often report getting fewer colds, less flu.
Fewer colds.
Yeah.
That's a nice perk.
Definitely. And maybe the biggest internal win is tackling insulin resistance.
Okay, explain that connection again.
So insulin resistance is driven by constantly high blood sugar, right, from glucose, and also by that fructose clogging up the liver.
Right, the fatty liver issue.
Precisely. Cutting sugar, especially fructose, is absolutely key to reducing fatty liver. And why does that matter so much? Because a fatty, dysfunctional liver is like the central hub around most degenerative diseases.
Such as?
Type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, bad cholesterol levels, Alzheimer's, dementia, even strokes. They're all heavily linked back to metabolic dysfunction, often starting in the liver.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Connecting fatty liver to all of those.
It really is. It's a central mechanism.
And our sources mentioned some other kind of cool side benefits, resetting taste buds.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. After you cut out the hyper-sweet stuff for a while, natural foods start tasting amazing. Like fruit tastes incredibly sweet, vegetables taste more vibrant.
And saving money.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Less spent on processed snacks, sugary drinks, stuff like that. It can add up.
And even eyesight. How does that work?
High blood sugar can actually cause swelling in the tiny blood vessels in your retina. So getting blood sugar under control can sometimes lead to sharper vision. It's pretty direct.
Incredible. Okay, so someone listening is convinced. They're ready. Should they just stop cold turkey? Or ease into it? And does the advice change depending on, where someone's starting from health-wise?
Good questions. For sugar itself, the strong advice from our sources is cold turkey.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Especially if you feel you have that addictive pull towards it. Even a little bit can keep those cravings firing and keep you stuck in that cycle.
Okay, cold turkey for sugar.
Yeah.
But who needs to cut what? Does everyone need to cut starches too?
That depends. It really hinges on where you fall on the, let's call it the metabolic spectrum.
How do you know where you are on that?
Key markers give you clues.
Yeah.
Things like your A1C, that's your average blood glucose over about 3 months. Also fasting glucose, triglycerides, insulin levels. Those numbers tell a story.
Okay. So let's say someone is lean, pretty healthy metabolically,
Hmm.
maybe A1C under 5.5, fasting glucose below 95. What about them?
For that person, absolutely avoid sucrose and all those added sugars we talked about. Definitely.
Right.
But they might benefit from including some whole food starches, maybe some potatoes often tolerated better than grains for some people. But even then, starches shouldn't be the main part of their diet.
Good fruit for this group.
Maybe 1 or 2 servings a day could be fine, but maybe not every single day or even every month necessarily, depends on the individual.
Got it. Now, what about someone who's maybe insulin resistant or pre-diabetic? Say A1C around 6, fasting glucose maybe 110.
Okay, for that group, the recommendation shifts. They should avoid both the added sugars and the starches.
Both.
Yeah, both are significantly impacting their blood sugar and insulin. Fruit-wise, maybe a small handful of berries occasionally, but generally avoid other fruits.
Berries are lower sugar.
Lower sugar and lower fructose, generally, yes.
Okay. And then for someone with diagnosed type 2 diabetes, A1C over 6.5, fasting glucose over 130, for instance.
For someone with type 2 diabetes, our sources recommend being very strict. Avoid pretty much all significant sources of carbohydrates. That means sucrose, added sugars, and starches.
Wow, very strict.
Yes. The goal is to get blood sugar and insulin way down. A few berries might be okay, very sparingly, but other fruits are generally off the table for this group, at least initially.
Okay, that stratification makes sense. Now, back to those little hidden bits,
Yeah.
like the 1 gram of sugar in deli meat or putting milk in coffee. Does that sabotage everything?
Metabolically speaking,
Yeah.
that single gram of sugar in your turkey slice, probably not going to derail your progress significantly. Our sources generally agree on that.
Okay, that's reassuring.
However, if you're aiming for like purest levels, or more importantly, if even that tiny hint of sweetness triggers cravings for more sugar.
The craving trigger.
Exactly. Then yeah, maybe you do need to avoid even those small amounts. It becomes more about managing the addiction pathway.
And coffee? Black is okay. What about a splash of milk?
Black coffee is totally fine. A tablespoon, maybe 2, of milk or half and half. Usually okay if you tolerate dairy and aren't super sensitive metabolically. But the added sugar in coffee, strongly recommend cutting that out completely.
Even if it tastes weird at first.
Oh, it probably will taste funny for a few days, but you adapt so quickly. Seriously, you'll likely reach a point where you can't imagine putting sugar in it again.
Interesting. And one last clarification.
Yeah.
Fruit versus vegetables. You mentioned berries.
Right. Very important distinction. Fruits and vegetables are not in the same category metabolically. Focus on eating lots more non-starchy vegetables, leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, that kind of thing. Be really careful and deliberate with fruit, following those guidelines based on your metabolic health.
Okay, wow. That was incredibly insightful. A true deep dive into what cutting sugar for 30 days really entails. It's so much more than just weight loss.
It really is. The impact is systemic, touching almost every aspect of your physical and mental health.
The connections are just profound.
Indeed. And, it raises an interesting question for you, the listener, to think about.
Mhm.
If freeing your body from this one thing, this dependence on sugar, can unleash such a powerful cascade of positive changes, what other seemingly small adjustments in your daily habits, your routines, might hold the potential for equally profound, maybe even life-changing results?
That's a great thought to end on.
We definitely encourage you, take the 30-day sugar challenge, see what happens, experience the difference for yourself.